catch it because you were
Okay, they just caught that. So now we're live.
Okay.
So we're just talking. This is Jo Singerman.
Hi.
And Joe, the reason for this interview kind of is Joe responded to the Tim Talk we did with Jennifer Ruggins-Muir, who's a friend of Joe's, and he was very sort of complimentary to what we were doing. And Joe has been a reporter for CTV News for 27 years?
Almost 27, yeah.
27 years. So he had some tips, so I thought maybe we could do a Tim Talk with Joe, and then Joe could interview me, and then I just thought that might be an interesting
Great idea.
way to do things. Joe has a million stories.
I used to get paid to tell stories.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do for a living.
That's great. Now, tell me how you started that. How did you start broadcasting?
All I ever wanted to do was be a professional photographer, cinematographer, and work at the National Film Board. I tried. In those days, it was very politicized, the NFB. It was a federal agency, it still is, but if you weren't a francophone or had a francophone name, it was very, very difficult. So I was out there, and I did have a beard when I was still in grade 11 here in high school up in Laval. And I went in. I remember putting on a purple tie and my only sports jacket and gray flannels. I went in. I never got the job, and I knew one of my classmates, his father. His name was Paul, and his dad was head of the lab, the film lab. So I said, "Oh, I know Mr. Schofield," and that didn't get me in. So, and then Jerry Potterton, who you may have heard of. Jerry lives down the road. He just celebrated his 89th birthday two days ago. Heavy metal, producer of heavy metal, and one of the greatest cinematographers and cartoonists at the National Film Board. I went in. He left the NFB, and so I went and I did an interview with Jerry. He didn't hire me. I still have the rejection letter, which I wave across his face sometimes. So at that point, I said, well, so much for photography, maybe, and I did very well in English literary criticism, English language skills. At the same time, I loved chemistry, I loved physics. But then I said, well, why don't I combine it with my passion, which is photography? And I'll go to journalism school, and I'll study journalism, and I'll combine the two. And TV involves moving pictures, sometimes still pictures, and that's what I did. And so I went to Carleton University in Ottawa. I got a master's degree in journalism, law, and English literary criticism.
Wow.
Yeah, as a minor, which blended well and has served me well in journalism, certainly, and in life. I went on and worked for CTV, did a lot of documentaries. They hired me as an investigative reporter. We started one of the first investigative units in Canada. We won many awards. Myself and the two other members are recipients of the Ohio State University Medal of Honor, and which is like the Emmy. And,
wow.
And so that was when we did something on the handicapped here in Montreal.
Okay.
That even at the Ministry of Health and Social Services, there was no ramp for handicapped persons to go up. And we filmed somebody trying to go up, and they fell over in their wheelchair. We had to go and help them back up. So this was very poignant and very dramatic. And we continued to do some amazing things. I've been really privileged, and I say privileged. I ran for this morning, my Bishop's University mug, and I just thought of something. I'm privileged because I had a ringside seat to the circus of life. And part of that circus are meeting some great people.
Yeah.
Desmond Tutu.
Wow.
Desmond Tutu was invited. I was on the board of, up until recently, for over 10 years, I was on the corporation and the executive committee of bishops, which I still have my bishop's mug here.
Yeah.
And you see, you serve for 10 years, you get a mug.
Nice.
And although I never went to bishops, but I really enjoyed that. We invited Bishop Tutu to bishops here, and a very, very interesting discussion with him. I had the privilege of interviewing him. And this was after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. And it was sad. He was able to lift our spirits, and then tell us about the realities of life being black in South Africa, and great stories. Great stories. So I've been very privileged, and through that you learn a lot about people, the good things and the bad things. Sure, I've interviewed Desmond Tutu, interviewed the first man to play golf on the moon, met Neil Armstrong. I could do a whole list, but the most interesting people, Tim, are really the people that you've never heard about. The guy who I found sleeping on a park bench in old Montreal, he used to be a millionaire.
Wow.
He lost his family because of drugs and alcohol, and now he was destitute. And he had a story to tell, and he did it with pride that he did raise a family and he was successful, but with sadness. And those are the people you remember most. Being a journalist for 27 years was fascinating, but it also is hard on the heart and soul. It lifts your spirit sometimes when you get to meet Kenny Rogers, or Cat Stevens, or some of the people that I grew up with, and you probably grew up with as well. But then you have to interview the mother whose child has just died in a burning five-alarm blaze on L'Esplanade in Montreal. And those are the tough things. These are the tough things. And you learn. I was 21, 22 years old when I started in the profession, and I had to grow up very quickly because I saw things and experienced things that most people honestly would never experience in a lifetime. And
it strikes me it's not unlike the life of a priest. Meeting
except people don't come to me for advice
well,
or for confession they do confess to me sometimes.
Fair enough. Now, tell me, so subsequent to your work with CTV, I see on your Facebook page you work with air shows. Tell me about
I've been a pilot since I was 16 years old. It's been a passion of mine. I was in the Royal Canadian Air Cadets when I was about 12, 13 years old. And then at 15, I started taking flying lessons. The interesting thing was at that stage, I was also privileged. I was at 588 Squadron at Canadair in Montreal, and we had an old hangar where they used to build parts for submarines on Côte Vertu East. And we used to march. But it paid off because I was awarded a Duke of Edinburgh's award, flying scholarship. I was a silver recipient. And so basically the government paid for my flying lessons when I was 16. I went up to Bagotville in the Saguenay and trained there. And I've been flying ever since.
Wow.
There was a spell for about 18 years where and I still have a passion for sailing. I had a boat down in Lake Champlain, not far from here, and sailing was my life. And you can't do both. So my annual hours in my logbook were slim. But we changed that when the Canadian dollar took a tumble. I decided to sell the boat and move down here to Knowlton because my boat was my country house. I didn't live in Knowlton. So that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I've been here ever since. And love the community. As you know, I've been involved in the community and bishops, and it's been fun. Yeah. But photography and flying have been my passion, and those are the two passions in my life. I later got my commercial license just when I was leaving CTV, and that time I said, I really have to exploit this passion. And budget cuts were happening, resources were being limited, we were losing researchers, we were losing staff members. I had over 20 years seniority, I had nothing to worry about, but people were losing their jobs. And the amount of investigative reporting, the amount of solid journalism was taking a back seat to sensational news, which I didn't like. I'm a traditionalist. I learned the traditional craft and who, what, when, where, why, and you go further. So at the same time, Bombardier Aerospace knocked on my door. Before that, there was Air Canada, and they said, we'll need a public relations director, and you're perfect because you know about flying, you understand aircraft, you understand the business. And I said, interesting. So I thought about it for about a year, and nothing came of it. And then finally I said, yeah, I think after 26 years, 27 years, it's time. And I always, when I was 16, 17, I always wanted to do 3 different things in my life, just for variety, stepping stones. Stepping stones. You use the knowledge and the education that you acquire, and you go on to the next step, and you use those skills and experience, most importantly, life experiences. And I learned a lot about the corporate world, management. I later went back to school at, I think, 48 years old, to McGill School of Management, and got an MBA. I was about to do a specialized course in air and space, an MBA in aviation, but I was just too busy working.
Wow.
I
Okay.
was just too busy working. I couldn't, I was leaving the office at 7:30 at night, so I was missing the first hour of classes. But it was exciting, and I still love learning and reading.
Yep.
So that's how the aviation. And then 11 years ago, we were just sitting around the airport here in Brome on the other side of the mountain, and we decided to do something. And in the period of 4 weeks, we put on an air show. And we got the snowbirds, we got the CF-18 demonstration squadron, we got some of the best pilots in Eastern Canada. It was a thrill, including Pete McLeod on the Red Bull racing team. It's been a lot of fun. And we've done about 6 shows. We're in the process of planning the next one. There are a lot of headwinds, I should say, these days because of carbon.
Sure.
Airplanes use fuel. Some people believe that they pollute the sky. So we've made a proposal to some of our sponsors that we will capture those carbon credits, and we will plant trees.
Okay.
Kids in Bromont plant trees for every pound of carbon that they'll produce. But a small Cessna aircraft or a small aerobatic aircraft uses 3 gallons of fuel for a 15-minute show. It's nothing. It's negligible. But we're conscious and we have to be environmentally conscious.
Sure.
So that's what I'm working on now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's interesting is last Sunday we had a little message from James Sutar. And James Sutar is a virtual member of St. Paul's.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Hong Kong, and he is a pilot. And I actually flew with him from Bromont this past summer. Had a great time. James is a great guy, and that's kind of interesting segue into kind of some of the stuff that we're doing. So next steps for you after what you've I've heard 2 steps. You said you want to do 3. So
well, I'm continuing in management, and right now I'm part-time. I'm managing and running the boutique with other people when it gets busier this summer at Leon Corville on the Brome Road. And it's a lot of fun. So I've always liked wine. I don't drink great quantities of wine. I don't have a huge wine cellar, but I enjoy wine. I've always appreciated good wine, not cheap wine. And so I'm learning about the chemistry. And we have some excellent chemists there, enologists, and I'm learning a lot about the history and the tradition. And my arms in the last week have becoming really strengthened because I've been turning 900 bottles of champagne.
Turning them?
1/8 every morning and 1/8 back in the evening.
Wow.
And the champagne is quite good there, if I can do a little plug.
For sure, absolutely.
And it's local, it's local, it's biological, there's no chemicals, we don't use any chemicals, and we won awards in France. We won 2 awards for we can't call it champagne, it's sparkling wine.
Okay,
we call it our bubbles. But there's a lot of technique involved. We use a lot of the traditional French methods for our wines. Not only 1 fermentation, but 2 fermentations. And I do a lot of tours and visits for people. We have people from Belgium this weekend, and South Africa, and Dallas. And we get a lot of people. Some come to see Knowlton and 3 Pines.
Okay,
because of Louise Penny. So we get a lot of people from Texas.
Louise Penny.
Well, she's a dear friend, and I worked with Louise when she was the CBC. So she was a dear friend of mine, and she was sort of the matron of the literary festival, which I guess 11 years ago, Philip Lantier and myself started as literally the correspondence of Eastman letter writing forum that they had for many years in Eastman. We said, well, let's do this in Knowlton. So we had people writing letters in all different beautiful spots, including the Lavender Farm and Mill Pond and all over on St. Paul Street. And so I did that, the Literary Festival, a lot of fun. And also when I first moved to Knowlton, I said, I've got to get involved in this community. I have to give back, it's such a great place to live. So they had a thing, Tim, before your time. It was called Imagine Action. And it was a group, it was about 10 or 12 different focus groups, interest groups, to report back to town council at the time. And I was on the environment committee. So at that time we said, hey, we got a problem with the lake. There's a lot of algae at the end, and there's motorboats, and we have to keep it clean. So that began, and we have to have walking paths, and we have to have, and when they finally, the helicopter landed with the Trestle Cove passageway, gangway, I was delighted because that was a dream over 28 years ago.
Wow. And
it finally materialized thanks to community support. So I got involved with the community, for duck festivals and the literary festival, and you can only do so much.
Sure.
You can only do so much. So for the time being, I'm Brome, while it's not in the town of Brome Lake, it's our regional airport. People here use it. Laurent Baudouin uses it. Our ex-prime minister, Paul Martin, uses it. And so a lot of people here use it, and we want to get the kids. Why I do air shows, you may ask.
Why do you do air shows?
It's for the next generation. Right now there's a pilot shortage in Canada.
Okay.
We need 7,000 pilots in the next 2 years. We don't have enough. Air Canada, WestJet are canceling flights in Western Canada and the North because they don't have enough pilots. So we got to get kids interested. It takes money sometimes, but there are grants and subsidies available for young students. But I do it because I became passionate about it when I was young, and I see passion in a lot of eyes. And when we had a kid who came with his parents, he was about 14, he was a juvenile delinquent, had a lot of problems at school, long hair. And he came to our show 5 years ago, and he saw the F-18 and the snowbirds and said, I want to do that. He cut his hair, he moved his grades because he said you have to be good at math, and you have to be good at some science skills. And he joined the Air Cadets, and he's now in the military in the Air Force.
Wow.
And for me, that's heartwarming, because that's the whole point. That's why I do it. It's not just to see a jet go boom, 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 and do loop-de-loops, and go up into the stratosphere.
But there is some of that, clearly, the way you describe that.
There's the wow factor. There's the wow factor, and people like noise and boom, boom, boom. But there's more than that. So what we've done at the air show, our committee, we've decided to split the air show into two pillars. One is the education pillar, which is important to get kids interested. And because of the show 3 years ago, Massey Vanier now has a sort of aeronautical mechanic program. So we got them interested. They came to the show. They spent some time there. They got to speak with the pilots, the aerospace mechanics, the aerotechs, as we call them. And so they have a vocational program now at Massey Vanier for that. And then they go to the CEGEP in the South Shore near Pratt and Whitney, Edouard Montpetit, and they can become aviation mechanics or pilots. So that's why we do it. That's why we do the show. And then the other thing is for families. It's a family event. It's something different. It's beautiful. We have everything from the CF-18, a powerful fighter supersonic interceptor, which I got to fly. I'm lucky. To the old P-51 Mustangs, Spitfires, and I gave a small speech at the Niagara Falls Air Station a couple of years ago, and I really believe in this. Air shows are a connection to the past, the present, and the future. The past, it's the Spitfires, the brave men and women who risked their lives and lost their lives. Many here in Knowlton risked their lives and lost their lives, and their names are on the cenotaph in front of Knowlton Academy. And we have to pay honor to these individuals, these brave young men who are 16, 17 years old. And they said, here, go fly a Spitfire. That's tough. The present is the new technology. I fly with an iPad.
Wow.
I use an iPad for navigation.
Yeah.
I get live weather in my cockpit on my iPad. And now my house here in Olton is a station for a new technology which is called ADSB, for Autonomous Directional Synchronized System. So my house sends a signal that the plane sends down, and it goes up to the satellite, and it goes all around the world. So I have about 900 planes that pass over Knowlton and Brome and Waterloo every day.
Wow.
They're mainly coming from Europe. Some are going to Moncton. The small Porter Airlines are going to Moncton, and I see them on my screen, and it's really fun. So I've got an antenna on my roof, and I do that, and that's a passion, because it's not that like, okay, what's that plane? And it says, oh, that's Lufthansa 747, and it tells me how high they are, where they're going, where they came from, and even the military, but they don't tell where the military aircraft are going.
Yeah.
So that's like boys with toys, you know.
Sure.
It's fun. And I throw that out just to show that this passion continues from age 16. And if you're passionate about something, whether it's that or photography, stick with it, do it.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know where I'm going.
You don't know? Well, you know you're going to wine next.
Maybe retire. My retirement's going to be interesting because I can't sit and do the crossword puzzle on it in a rocking chair. So I'm going to do a little more traveling, go back to Australia, which I love. I haven't been on a beach in a while, so go back to Barbados. I worked there for a year for the BBC, which is the Barbados Broadcasting Corporation.
Okay, yeah.
And I reorganized their newsroom and upgraded their standards. It was interesting because they work in a different time zone and time dimension.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, we'll cover the story. Yeah. And when I was there many years ago, Paul McCartney and Linda were arrested for possession of marijuana. And so I sent a cameraman to go, and he went the next day. And this was, I'm not making fun of the Bajans. They're great people, but it's just the Caribbean mentality.
Yep.
It's a little slower pace than we are here.
Nice.
And we can learn from them too. To slow down, smell the roses.
Yeah.
And it'll get done, but no panic, no anxiety.
That's that's good advice for all of us, isn't it? We're so worried. We're so so much anxiety and depression.
Now.
It's
got the phone's ringing. I got to answer my cell phone now.
Yeah.
People. I forgot my phone the other day, and I was driving into Sherbrooke, and at first I said, "Oh, geez, what I was at." Well, that's okay. If it's important, they'll call back.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think we're going to cut it there, and maybe we'll start again. Oh, attempting to reconnect. So we may have some problems, but maybe we'll. Yeah. Anyway, Joe.
Thank you.
We got to do that. Right. We'll see where we're at.
Do you know that they're actually out of Purell at the pharmacy?
Really?
And so I says, well, I'll just buy some isopropyl alcohol and some aloe. That's what Purell is.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have any more. It's on back order.
Oh,
it's
geez.
the rush. So I had some at home and I made some.
Interesting. We have a woman who worked at LEK for years and years and years, and about a month ago, and I don't know exactly why, but she brought us, I don't know, probably 24 bottles of Purell.
That's great. My neighbor Nicole Shabbat, I'm going to call her because I need some. When you're doing wine tastings and you take the wine glasses and people have touched it with their hands and they go like that.
Oh yeah.
And
we don't even know, right?
No. So I brought a bar of soap in this